Our next speaker is Lindsey German. She's one of the founding members of Counterfire, a writer, an activist, campaigner, and convener of Stop the War Coalition. I'm sure if you go out to the bookstall just outside, you'll find some of Lindsey's books available to purchase, and we'll find them very interesting reading indeed. So please welcome Lindsey German.
Thanks very much, Tarina, and just to say what a great honour it is to be on this platform, and Khalid in particular, for your benefit. I have to say that being somebody who's Egyptian and political, to me that is so important, but not just for what the Egyptians did in 1956 over Suez, but also for the revolutionary spirit of the Egyptian people, which we saw so strongly in the Tahrir Square protests and the revolution then. So it's a great pleasure to be here, and with Jeremy, who just called me a troublemaker, but it takes one to know one, so there we go. What I wanted to talk about this morning is, I want to kind of just, I mean, I'm sure we're all feeling pretty fed up after the election results, with a few very important exceptions, like the comrades from Preston who got three councillors, two of whom are going to be joining us later on for this weekend, but are subject to the delights of anti-West Coast trains. But I think overall, as has been said, the overall picture is a picture of the far right gaining lots of seats, lots of councils, a by-election for an MP, all of those sorts of things. So, and I think for all of us, when we look at these things, there's no question you feel depressed, just as when you see Trump, you feel depressed and you feel terribly worried about what is going to happen. You see what is happening to people around the world as a result of these. You see what the prospects might be of the growth of the far right and fascism. So we're coming together at a very, very important time. And I think one where what I want to talk about really is not so much what Trump has done. We've already heard two really, really powerful speeches about Palestine, but also some of the other things to do with the deportation of migrants, to do with the attacks on students and academics for their support for Palestine, to do with the way in which they're sacking people in the United States. All of these things, and the culture wars, all of these things I think we're aware of. But I want to talk about the way in perhaps in which we can defeat Trump and defeat the far right here, and that means obviously doing something rather different from what Keir Starmer's doing, because Keir Starmer obviously doesn't like Trump, but what is his response to Trump's election? Is to appease him, which is essentially what he's doing. I mean, when you go to the White House and grovel and offer a state visit meeting the king, which is unprecedented, it tells you exactly what a spineless, gutless person that you are. And it's interesting as well that Starmer yesterday, as these terrible election results for Labour came in, was visiting a drone factory. And we've already heard the impact of these drones on the flotilla and all the other kind of things. But there is another side to this, and this is what I wanted to talk about really today, which is the other side. There is mass opposition across the world to Trump. And I want to talk about, firstly, the opposition in the United States, because this is something which is kind of hidden from politics over here, and people have all sorts of kind of weird views about what the United States is like and how can they elect Trump and all the other things that people say about them, and don't they all have guns, and all, you know, people have a kind of stereotypical view of lots of American working class people. Well, it's worth remembering that, 6 weeks ago, they had 1,200 demonstrations across the United States in opposition to what Trump was doing. A friend of mine on Facebook put a picture up of the May Day demonstration in Chicago this year, and it's not a holiday in the United States. In fact, they have very few holidays, one of the great advantages of being the biggest capitalism in the world, that you work all the time. Tens of thousands of people on this May Day demonstration, people of all races and nationalities, all ages, all coming together against Trump. And I think it's important we understand that that is going on, and that we show solidarity with the people in the United States who are suffering so badly and will continue to do as a result of this. And that, of course, we commit now that if and when Trump comes on this state visit, which is supposed to be in September, that we will have the biggest demonstration in this country that we have seen for a very, very long time. And I think we also need to locate where we are, because Trump is a megaphone for the far right across the world. That's what he does. You know, he says something, every right-winger in Britain thinks this is great. You know, now the Reform councillors are talking about we're going to have a Department of Government Efficiency in Durham Council in order to get rid of anybody who talks about diversity or climate change. This is the kind of ridiculous sort of policy. But at the same time, it's not fascism yet. And I think we've got to understand that he's preparing the way. The far right internationally are preparing the way for what can be fascism. And we know the threat of war is growing. We know the threat of economic recession is growing. We know all these things are happening. But the truth is, you couldn't have tens of thousands of people on a demonstration in Chicago if it was fascism. And therefore, we've got to be aware we still can stop this, and we still can do what we can, and we still can defeat. If we can defeat Trump, we can certainly defeat Nigel Farage and the sort of pound shop Trumps that exist over here. And that's what we have to try to do. And I think it's important we look at what the election results here really mean. You see, there is no doubt that there is a big scapegoating of migrants and refugees going on, and that was obviously a very important part of these election results. Not entirely surprising, given that the media and every political party, or mainstream political party, has gone along with this scapegoating, has never put up any alternative arguments to it for decades now. So no wonder people, when they can't get a house or they can't get a job, think, oh, it must be the migrants to blame. All of these things that you hear time and time again. So it's important we understand that is a central part of it, but there are other central parts of it. The Labour canvassers in Runcorn said time and again what people raised on the doorstep was getting rid of the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, was getting rid of PIP for disabled people. And this is because those working class people are some of the poorest people in the country. In places like Runcorn, very large numbers are on sick or disability. All of those things. This is another aspect to it. Now, when people vote for reform because they think they're going to get the winter fuel allowance, they must be mad. But you can understand why, if you don't like the Tories, and if you don't like what Starmer is doing, that you will look to them as an alternative. And the crucial question for me, it seems to me, is how we transform this mass disillusion with Labour into a left alternative. And so, while the overall picture was bad yesterday, there were alternatives. I've talked about Preston. The Greens, who I've got a kind of slightly ambivalent attitude towards, to put it nicely, but the Greens did improve their vote and did, you know, the people who were looking for that. And I think we've got to try and build on that. But we've also got to build on what people are struggling on the ground. The Palestine movement needs to get much bigger to be able to respond to this starvation that is going on at the moment. The trade union movement needs to get much stronger and support people like the Birmingham bin workers, where there's going to be a mass picket next Friday, which we should all go to if we can. We've got to build all these. We've got to fight against all forms of oppression. We've got to fight against racism. We've got to fight against the exploitation which is causing millions of people to live in such misery. And I'll just conclude by saying this, that more than 100 years ago, Rosa Luxemburg, who was one of the great socialists, fantastic woman with disability, was a Jewish woman, was Polish and therefore nationally oppressed. She was somebody who said the choice facing humanity is socialism or barbarism. I think when we look at the world, the deliberate starvation of the people of Gaza, the criminalisation of people who want to protest, the way in which refugees and migrants are being treated, we can see barbarism is very, very clearly on the horizon. That means we have to fight for socialism harder than we've ever done before in order to build and create that alternative.
Yay!